I know all of us have been in a scenario at some stage in our life where we have committed to something and then life got in the way. We just became too busy. Now, this is a really interesting thing to start to observe. If you start to get curious about how your mind works, you will see that the busyness the mind has created is there for a reason. It's not that life just happens and I have a husband and children and a wife and a partner and a job and all these other things that seem very logical and very practical, and it's very easy for you to justify that is the reason. But what's actually happening is you have created this scenario. Your brain is very clever and it's working out how to keep you safe. So sometimes the busyness is a way that it does that. I would get curious as to why the mind creates busyness and distraction and what's actually underneath that. Why does my mind constantly want to distract me? What is it distracting me from? What is it protecting me from acknowledging or feeling? When we fall in these continuous patterns, it's happening from a subconscious level. Our mind is wanting to protect us from something. But sometimes these protection mechanisms are actually stopping us from growing, are hindering our potential, are not allowing us to come into the version of ourselves that we are working very hard to become. So what you can do is get curious about why the mind is distracting you and forget about all the logical and practical reasons this is happening. Because that is what the mind wants you to believe. It doesn't want you to look at it or go underneath or look at what it's trying to distract you from. It simply wants you to be in that distraction. So get curious. What is my mind distracting me from? What is it my mind wants me to avoid? What is it my mind doesn't want me to see? And why? The most common reason that the mind distracts us is simply because it's distracting us from a feeling. Now, this feeling can be sadness, depression, anger, feeling out of control. There's many different things that we are distracting ourselves from on a daily basis. The problem with this is we are only distracting, we are not acknowledging or processing the emotion that we're trying to avoid. Therefore, technically, on a subconscious level, we're still in that emotional experience, which is why we can't move forward or stop ourselves from being busy or procrastinating. Whatever the excuse or the reason is, you can't step into the thing that you're wanting to really embody. It is because there is something you are not wanting to acknowledge. And it's not that you're doing it on purpose. This is all coming from the subconscious. The subconscious is trying to protect us from something that we do not feel safe acknowledging. So the first thing you can do is just get curious as to when your mind distracts you, and then get curious as to why it distracts you. Be wary though, because the mind is very clever and will constantly convince you of the things that you want to hear, so you won't look at the thing that it's distracting you from. Now, how this affects you from a psychic perspective is if your mind is constantly trying to distract you, it's very hard to come into an intuitive state. Because in that distracted, busy state, you are in the mind. You are not in intuition. So to come into more of an intuitive state, we need to acknowledge that we are distracted, that the mind is creating busyness, and then gently and slowly get curious as to why it's doing that. What does it think it's keeping us safe from? When we start acknowledging these parts of ourselves, then we can move more into an intuitive state and see what's actually happening from a subconscious perspective. If we see ourselves more deeply, we can then see whatever we are tuning into just at the same level. This is why you would have heard me on many occasions say, the deeper you see yourself, the deeper you can see everything else.